Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. It is 2 minutes past the top of the hour here on Thursday, June 6th, 2024. You are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am your host, Eric Balkman. You follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. If you don't follow me on the X, not offended. That's okay. You can also find me at the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown as well. 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship is live right now at myffpc.com. Jump in a draft tonight, play for $1 million, just $350 to enter. And by the way, if you enter prior to June 15th and draft your teams prior to June 30th, you'll get a free $35 FFPC team credit put to your account right away. And you can do that up to 3 times too. And remember, if you sign up for 3 Fantasy Pros drafts, you do get that $50 discount on your third team as well. So go to myffpc.com. You can also scan the QR code on the screen right now that you see. Sign up, register. I'm commissioning some drafts tonight after the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get in there, talk fantasy football, see how you draft. Maybe you win $1 million. You never know. Go to myffpc.com to check out the Superflex Best Ball Tournament as well as the Classic Best Ball Tournament. Superflex only costs you $35 to get in, and you can win a $100,000 grand prize. That grand prize is up from $50,000 last year, and the Best Ball Tournament grand prize is up from $200,000 last year. It's now a $300,000 grand prize. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. We already have the FFPC main event slow drafts off and running for those of you who want to participate in the $1 million grand prize. Again, a $6 million prize pool there. Scan the QR code. Get signed up for that. You can start drafting for $1 million right away today or tomorrow, this weekend, whenever you want to do it. And if you like playing fantasy football 365 days a year, we have Dynasty Startups and Empire Dynasty Startups, the only Dynasty fantasy football league we offer that has a progressive prize pool. So check that out at myffpc.com or scan the QR code on your screen right now to get registered and play. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch, the man behind the glass tonight. And welcome back, our co-host with the most. You know him from Establish the Run for the NFL awards. You know him from Player Profiler coming to a computer screen near you. You follow him on the X at Ryan Reynolds NFL. Welcome back onto the show, Mr. Ryan Reynolds. Ryan, thank you so much for hopping aboard tonight.
Thank you for having me, dude. And, your beard, man, just immaculate. I love it. It puts mine to shame. I'm a good beard guy. You're crushing me though.
No, well, listen, I put way too much work on this, and work is probably not the term my wife would want me to use. But there has been a lot of growth on this. It is in desperate need of a trim. I need to get that scheduled ASAP. Speaking of nothing that we were just talking about. When you appear on these shows like this, given your name and given all these people who post at you on X that think you are the actor Ryan Reynolds, the Deadpool Ryan Reynolds, do you ever get sick like when you come on shows like this? Because I won't make any jokes about it. I won't make any jokes about it if you're sick of it. Do you ever get sick of all the Ryan Reynolds confusion with your name and the actor's name?
No, if you were to make 3 or 4 jokes over the next 2 hours, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. I like you. But if you tag me in a post with like Taylor Swift and, whoever else, and you actually think my gigantic face is the guy who's playing Deadpool, like that makes me lose a little faith in humanity. It happens so often. Some of the questions I've gotten in DMs just you wouldn't believe it. But no, you make any joke you want, man.
So are you a superhero fan? Like if you were an X-Men, who would you be? Which one would you be?
Oof. I'm old now, so I'd probably have to be Beast because I'm large, little cerebral.
But, would be good. Yeah.
When I was a young man, I would have probably leaned into Wolverine a little bit. We'll see him in, oddly enough, Deadpool in theater soon.
That's going to be exciting, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of posts coming at you on X about the move. So this is like, I know you're a betting expert, right? Like you're always trying to find the angles for betting. And I hope I'm not, being offensive to anybody watching tonight. But Ryan Reynolds, the betting expert, have you ever participated in a Deadpool before, where you're betting on, people who to die in a certain year? I know that's gotten a lot of popularity over the last decade.
Almost when I was young, but it fell through. I probably wouldn't do one now, but when I was a kid, I probably would have, been like, hey, whatever. Now I'm a little too close to it myself to get involved in that.
Well, and the other thing too is like, with the plethora of betting options that are out there for not just football, but all these different leagues. But I know, especially you for football, like, my God, it probably keeps you super busy. And by the way, coming up on the show tonight, we will go around the NFL in this first segment, but I do want to find out where Ryan stands on certain players like Audric, Estime, like Jonnu Smith, Daniel Jones. We'll also get into some would you rather draft, the backfield edition. We're going to attack some of these backfields, especially the AFC East. Miami and Buffalo, we'll get into that. We'll get into New Orleans. Nobody's like talking about like Kamara versus Kendra Miller right now. We'll get into that, and obviously Arizona and Pittsburgh too. And then we'll get into the schedule breakdown later on in the show to find out how you can exploit the NFL schedule for selfish means in the FFPC best ball tournament and best ball in general as well. As we move forward here, I want to talk about the big news of the week. We'll lead off with it right here. Justin Jefferson gets a 4-year, $140 million contract extension. So he will be a Buffalo Bill. We always like to say this. He'll be a Buffalo Bill for the next 4 years, or until Justin Jefferson and the Vikings decide they don't want to be in that contract anymore. And then we'll find out what happens. But he is now the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, $110 million guaranteed, an average annual value of $35 million. 392 catches, 5,900 yards, and 30 touchdowns in his first 4 seasons. That yardage is the most by any receiver in league history through their first 4 years, and he's one of just 5 receivers to go over 5,000 yards in that same span. He is going to be under contract now through 2028, and obviously when he hits 2020, or when he hits 2029, as it were, he'll be eligible for another big deal unless the Vikings lock him up for an extension. And obviously I think that, the Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins conversations, Tyreek Hill, maybe if you want to get into that as well, might be looking for new deals after this one. But let's talk about Justin Jefferson here, Brian. And I think that the thing that we want to know for fantasy is this is a player that was going at the 107, 108 prior to this. I think a lot of fantasy players have been pretty knowledgeable over the years to understand that these things normally sort themselves out. But when you look at now that it is being sorted out, it's done, it's June 6th. How high up should the guy who was going as the de facto 101 or 102 in 2023 drafts be going? Because now he's in the mid-first round, and I know we penalized him a little bit for his production last year. That's not all on him. That could be on the Vikings quarterbacks and obviously the offense there as well. How high up do you think Justin Jefferson goes? Is he going to get back up to that 102, 103 range?
I think probably 104, 105 would be my expectation going forward. I probably don't like JJ McCarthy as some. I'm probably in the middle on him. I've comped him to, if Alex Smith and Case Keenum had a baby, you have JJ McCarthy.
Right.
That's how I see him. That's sort of not really a great compliment. But, like you said, Jefferson's a historic producer. It's not like Kirk Cousins is, Dan Marino. He's better than people think. But the quarterback volatility scares me a little bit. I'll probably have him myself 5th or 6th.
Do you, and I know you've made a lot of bets on the Vikings this season, player props, what have you. When do you think McCarthy takes over? Because I have been on the record, I think, saying that I think Sam Darnold starts for this team the majority of the season. I don't think McCarthy takes over, if he does, until November at the earliest because of his resume in college. I don't know if he's necessarily ready to take over this team right away. And I think Sam Darnold has the opportunity with some really good weapons there to make some hay and to do some pretty good things with the Vikings offense. When do you foresee the inevitable switch happening, Darnold to McCarthy, Ryan?
I think if you look at the Vikings early season schedule at the Giants, that's a winnable game. But then they host the 49ers and Texans, go to Green Bay, host the Jets. That's a brutal schedule run with 3 very good defenses in there. Then they get their bye after week 6. I think that's the first realistic insertion point, unless Sam Darnold bombs. But I'm kind of a little bit bullish on Darnold too. He made a bet on himself a bit last year going to the 49ers, basically saying to himself, like, if Brock Purdy can't start the season, I can do some damage with these guys. Seems like he has the same approach here.
And Iron Daddy points out too, as soon as the Vikings announce Sam Darnold, not JJ McCarthy, is the quarterback, he thinks Jefferson is going to move up again, which is entirely possible here. Ryan, if you were drafting in a best ball league at the moment, how high up is too high up for Justin Jefferson for you right now?
I'd have McCaffrey just because I don't want to have zero McCaffrey. McCaffrey, same with Hill. I'm going to take Hill second because I want some Hill. Chase is the guy I want. Then Jefferson I'd probably take Jefferson over Lamb personally.
Jefferson over Lamb. Okay, and that makes perfect sense. The other thing too, I don't know if we have CeeDee Lamb on the rundown tonight, but we could just mention this right now. The other thing with Lamb is how much Cecil Lammey for Football Guy says this all the time. How much are we aware of the career year, right? Because Lamb just went off last year, and I think there's and you can make this case with Puka Nacua maybe to a different extent, because if you look at those two players, they absolutely went ham last year. What are the chances that they do that again? And maybe that's how you answer it. Well, you take the proven player coming off a down year with Jefferson over Lamb, and then that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I operate. I tend to buy low and sell high. And Lamb's a very good player, but I wouldn't put him quite in that top tier. I'd put him right next to that. So I would expect a bit of a step back from him. And like you said, Jefferson has a path to returning to form.
Right, exactly. And I think that's how I look at it as well. Getting into the rookies here, the Chiefs have now signed the 28th overall pick in the 2024 draft, Xavier Worthy, 4 years, $13.8 million. I don't know Ryan, I should ask you this too, because I don't even know the answer to this. How closely do you follow college football during the year?
During the season, not really at all. I dig into prospects once the playoffs start.
Okay, so you're well versed in all the rookies. Basically starting January on. That's what you immerse yourself in. Now, this deal is fully guaranteed. First round pick, he gets the 5th-year option. Now, he had the hamstring issue in OTAs. He was being held out. It's June. I'm not going to sweat about that as well. The Rashee Rice thing, I think, is what makes this compelling, right? Because we don't know if he's going to be suspended. We don't know if he's going to be suspended in 2024. We don't know. There's a lot of moving pieces here. And when you look at what the Chiefs' offense has been lacking, it's been lacking a combination of two things, right? Guys who can catch the ball and guys who can lift the lid on offense. They had half of that last year with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but most of the time he didn't catch the ball. And then they had other guys who could catch the ball. You think about Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, but they didn't have that field flipping capability that Xavier Worthy does. Now, as I look at the Fantasy Mojo on this, fantasymojo.com at Fantasy Mojo on the X, Darren Armani, the godfather of the pros versus Joes. Anytime we reference ADP on this show, it's always due to that website. I would encourage anybody who is playing in the FFPC to have subscription to fantasymojo.com. As I look at that right now, Xavier Worthy in the Fantasy Pros Championship, again, this is a managed format, wide receiver 42 at the 802. Ryan, this is Jordan Addison, Christian Watson, DeAndre Hopkins territory. Xavier Worthy, too high, too low, just right in the early 8th round as the 42nd receiver off the board, knowing what we know at the moment about the Rashee Rice situation.
Yeah, the Rashee Rice situation is interesting. I'm going to start with that because usually in these situations, I buy the dip because they usually get suspended the next year. But this guy committed 2, we'll call them mistakes. It's like he's actually trying to tank his career. So I don't know if they're going to pivot there. So I'm actually avoiding that. I would say it's just right, maybe a little bit too early. I'd probably rather gamble on Hopkins for 1 year. Long term, I'd rather have Worthy, especially because Hollywood Brown's in Kansas City too. So there's 2 guys with similar skill sets on the roster right now. But again, you have Patrick Mahomes, you have a guy with elite speed. At least I'd probably rather have him in best ball than season long because of the lid lifting ability, the spike game potential. But I think in the 8th round's fine, and I'll be about even on him in best ball.
Let me ask you this, because all those players I mentioned, yes, they're going right around Worthy, but at the same time, they are going, as far as ADP goes, just ahead of him. What about some of the players going behind Worthy? And I think this is a conversation that people are going to have with themselves when they are drafting this summer, including tonight. Who would you rather have here, Ryan? Xavier Worthy or Keon Coleman, a fellow rookie, also in a situation where he could be the number 1 target on a pretty good offense with a really, really good quarterback?
It's a great question. Worthy's a better player. Think for this season, I might lean Coleman, and that feels gross even saying it.
And then the other one I'll bring up too, teammates. Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice. They are separated by about a half round right now. Worthy's already made the transfer within the last 2 weeks. He is now ahead of Rashee Rice. Who would you rather have? And maybe you can answer this in two different ways. Who would you rather have in best ball? Who would you rather have in a managed league like the Fantasy Pros Championship?
I think in general, like I said, in general, I would go with Rice, but since he had 2 infractions, they might have to do something sooner. So I'll lean Worthy in both instances, just because I'm being a little tepid with Rice, uncharacteristically tepid, actually.
You're an odds guy. Give me a percentage chance that of Rashee Rice being suspended at any point during the 2024 season.
That's wonderful. Normally, if it was in most situations like this where it happens in the offseason, I'd give it 20%. I think now it's probably like 60, 65.
Wow.
Just because he did, 2 and like, again, it's ridiculous.
Right.
You'd think like if you do something stupid and you put your life on the line, you're going to play low a little bit. Not Rashee Rice.
No, that's what's crazy about this whole situation. And the other thing too is, and I'm thinking back to it, like, in doing my dynasty research last year, I didn't end up with a lot of Rashee Rice, but it wasn't necessarily because I didn't like him. I happened not to get him. And I don't really remember this off the field stuff, going on in his situation. Kev Wheeler, another former co-host of the show, chiming in on YouTube. The charges were dropped in one case. He thinks a 2-game suspension is likely. If a 2-game suspension happens, Ryan, is that a win for you? Where you're drafting him right now in FFPC leagues, again, in the Fantasy Pros Championship, the 8th round, if he only gets suspended for 2 games, is that a win?
If it's 2 games early, I'd say I'd regret what I've done to this point. If it's 2 games late, I'd be okay with it, But 2 games, I would say, generally speaking, I'd be buying him right now if 2 games was my expectation.
Okay.
And I think that's fair. Kev's a sharp guy.
Yes, yeah, he absolutely is. We're going back-to-back Xaviers here. I want to talk with you about Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette is dealing with a hamstring injury, and quite frankly, when you're 55 years old, these hamstring injuries happen, even if you're an NFL receiver. That is an age joke about Xavier Legette, a player that in my rookie drafts I tried to avoid as much as possible because I have a real tough time drafting a player who was kind of blasé for his first 3-4 years, whatever it was. And then his final year, when his body, you would think, is going to be as, much more developed, and his game is much more developed than the 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are guarding him, not kids, but players guarding him. Yeah. Legette went off that last year. Now, it was SEC. It was the best talent in America that he was going up against, but he goes to Carolina, which, listen, the Panthers offense was really, really bad last year, but I feel like Dan Morgan, the new GM there, understood that they needed more offensive skill players there, and they went out and got Deontay Johnson, Jatavian Sanders, Legette, and then obviously Jonathan Brooks as well. Legette is dealing with a hamstring injury right now. David Newton, who covers the Panthers for ESPN.com, said that this happened in OTAs. It's been lingering for about a week. This is a guy that needs more polish to his game. You want to get him on the field as much as possible. He even told beat reporters that the Panthers coaches were telling him, like, look, you're a great athlete. You need to become a better professional receiver. And now he's dealing with this injury. I don't, again, it's June. I don't get too bent out of shape on this, but I have seen it before, Ryan, where these guys who need as much field time as possible, and they get hurt early, and then they're kind of behind the 8 ball their whole rookie season. And I'm not putting Legette in that category yet, but it's certainly not trending the right way. He has dropped quite a bit in drafts. Technically, if you want a first-round wide receiver on your team, you could get one as late as the 1406, wide receiver 66 for Xavier Legette. From a non-dynasty standpoint, how does that sound to you, mid-14th round for Xavier Legette this year?
Yeah, at that price, that's doable. For this primary reason, I agree with you. I think he's going to start slow. He's going to get eased in. But like, if you remember, and I'm not expecting an Amon-Ra St. Brown late season spike, but we've seen rookie wide receivers go off in the second half of the season when it's money making season. So if I'm taking Legette, and in round 14, I'm going to take him some. I'm basically keeping him as a stash. Maybe he breaks through later in the season. But yeah, early in the year, I have very limited expectations.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. Is you draft this guy this year, I think it's kind of like for bye week issues, or if you're in best ball, you're drafting for a potential spike week. Now, how much spike potential does he have? I don't know. But I do know as far as receivers go on that team, I'm not necessarily betting on Adam Thielen to have another big season.
Right.
Adam Thielen was a guy last year for about like 4 or 5 weeks. He was unbelievably good. And then he kind of, I don't know if he realized how old he actually was and then just started playing like that. I don't know what happened, but in one of my higher stakes leagues that I play in, he actually got dropped. And I thought this was my ticket to paradise, right? Picking him up. And it was great for a few weeks. And then afterwards, he fell off. And I don't expect much from him this year. I am not a Jonathan Mingo guy. I think maybe I was at the time when he got drafted by Carolina. Now I've just kind of soured on him. So to the point of who is going to step up on the perimeter for Carolina, I think Legette is the guy that has the best shot of doing it. Will he do it? That's another whole conversation. And I don't really know, like, as much offense as Carolina has brought in, the guy there to own might be Deontay Johnson, Ryan.
Right. Yeah, he's probably going to be the X receiver. He's going to be the target leader. He's going to be the focal point of the offense, especially for a young guy like Bryce Young that they got to keep on get back on track. You need stability, and that's what he brings. I wasn't crazy about Jonathan Mingo as a prospect either. I had some interest last year just because it was a wide open receiver room, but he could get reps early that Legette takes as the season goes on. That's probably how I see it shaping up.
And that would make perfect sense too. I think like that we have seen that storyline play out over the course of the last 10, 15 years of NFL football. A lot of it has evolved that way as well. Keeping it on the receiver tip, I want to talk to you about the Indianapolis Colts here, and I got a lot of questions about the receivers, the quarterbacks, and the tight end as well. James Boyd for The Athletic reports that Adonai Mitchell has flashed his potential during OTAs. Now, Adonai Mitchell is a player that I think a lot of polarizing is a term that gets thrown around probably too much in this industry. But I will say for Adonai Mitchell, there are a lot of people believing in the talent. And while I don't doubt the talent, Ryan, I do wonder how heavy of a passing offense Indy's going to have this year. I do wonder how Mitchell fits in next to Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. I do wonder, how much Jonathan Taylor and maybe even Jelani Woods, and we'll get into him in a little bit, are going to take away from him in the passing game. Mitchell is a fun guy to have on your team, but is he going to be developing enough of these, quote unquote spike weeks that you need to be drafting him in the 13th round? What's interesting here, as I look at the Fantasy Pros ADP, he's going back to back with Josh Downs right now as wide receiver 62, wide receiver 63 in the late 13th round. What are your thoughts on how Adonai Mitchell's 2024 season is going to look like once the season comes to an end?
Bunch of great stuff in there. First, agree with you. I think pass volume is my biggest concern. On top of that, Shane Steichen's a great coach. We can expect to see this offense look a lot like the Eagles did under Jalen Hurts, which means RPO with Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, and then Michael Pittman running a lot of slants over linebackers' heads. He's going to be the volume hog. Mitchell, again, a bit like Worthy with, there's a huge drop-off between Patrick Mahomes and Richardson as passers, obviously. But, you're looking for a deep shot probably. So I think in half PPR, I lean Mitchell. In full PPR, I prefer Josh Downs.
And I think that's the right way to do it. The other thing too is Downs has the year under his belt. The guy I think that is killed by this is Alec Pierce, right? Like You can't best ball, managed leagues, Fantasy Pros Championship, FFPC main event. I really don't think he is worth drafting. At the point where and I'm just going to look up Alec Pierce's ADP. He may not even be getting drafted on average right now. By anybody in the Fantasy Pros Championship, and he's not. So I think you can just stay away from him. But this Colts offense, really, when it comes down to it, is going to focus on Anthony Richardson, who was on the Pat McAfee show this week. And he says, according to, again, this is the player. I always hesitate to take the player at their word for how healthy they are. But he says, when Pat McAfee asked him about his shoulder, that he's at about 95% right now. And that's, the injury to His shoulder is what ended his 2023 season. Anthony Richardson is according to Ian Rappaport, around noon, 1 o'clock today, reported that he's dealing with some shoulder soreness. That makes sense, when you're trying to knock the rust off. But he was throwing with his left hand rather than his right hand in team drills today. Shane Steichen kind of downplayed how serious the injury is, which you would expect the head coach to do. He said that if it was a game this time of year, Richardson would be out there. But, he only played in 4 games last year, and that was his rookie season. His ceiling, especially for best ball drafts, there's a lot of people, Ryan, excited about drafting Richardson this year. 27.4 fantasy points per game in the 2 games he appeared in, from the kickoff to the final whistle. I know extraordinarily small sample size, but when you look at Anthony Richardson's ADP this year among high stakes drafters, when you're talking about getting the quarterback position right, he's quarterback 6. There's only 5 quarterbacks that are being drafted ahead of him right now. He's going at the 609, just behind CJ Stroud, who I know everybody is super excited about for 2024. How do you handle a guy like Anthony Richardson in best ball drafts right now? I love the talent. I love the ceiling. Don't love this injury report, with the shoulder soreness. And that's an awfully high price to pay, especially if you can wait, several rounds and get Jordan Love or Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams, Brock Purdy, any of those guys. How do you feel about Anthony Richardson right now, Ryan?
I mean, you're buying him at his ceiling just about, like you said, and the injury is not even just the shoulder. I believe he got 2 concussions in the 4 games that he played. His play style is a bit conducive to taking hits, and that's where he brings his value as a runner. So I think the floor is horrifying, but if you're playing with any kind of volume, I think you at least have to be even with him, just because he could end up being like the fantasy quarterback 2 or 3 in a best case scenario, and plus maybe we'll talk about this later. Maybe we won't. The Colts also have an attractive late season schedule too. So I'm at least going to be even on him. But if I'm drafting one team, I'm probably not buying him at that price.
What about buying him? Okay, how about this? If you do decide to bite the bullet and draft him in the 6th round, how quickly are you drafting that second quarterback on your team, Ryan?
If I'm taking Richardson in a best ball draft, I'm probably rolling the dice where he's just going to hit.
Okay.
Draft like you're a number of smart people in our space. Use the phrase "draft like you're right." If I'm taking Richardson, I'm drafting like I'm right. Maybe I pair him with someone similar like Daniel Jones, where he's cheaper. Maybe I get a couple, or Bryce Young, maybe get a couple spike weeks out of him. But I'm banking on Richardson to have a borderline MVP season if I'm taking him.
Yeah, and that's what you got to do. I mean, if you want to win a $300,000 grand prize in the FFPC best ball tournament, certain sacrifices have to be made. And if you're choosing Richardson, as you pointed out, Ryan, if you're choosing Richardson in the 6th round, you sort of have to roll with him as the main focal point of that squad. Now, a player that could make him really, really good this year, according to the IndyStar.com, Jelani Woods has been making a lot of plays at OTAs. Now, through his first 2 seasons, Jelani Woods has only played 15 games, and all of them were in 2022. He had a hamstring injury that prevented him from being on the field at all in 2023, but apparently he's healthy and he's playing well this season. Joel A. Erickson, in this piece for the Indy Star, pointed out that Woods focused on working out his legs, strengthening his hamstrings, strengthening his quads, strengthening his hips to try to limit these soft tissue injuries that have been plaguing him in the past. He ran a 4.61 at the scouting combine 2 years ago, 25 catches, 312 yards, 3 touchdowns as a rookie, and 8 catches for 98 yards against the Steelers that season in 1 game too. This is a super athletic tight end. I play in a private dynasty league with co-founder of the FFPC, Dave Gerzak, and he actually drafted Woods, I think, in the late 4th round this year in the rookie free agent draft. And he posted on the comment, I just can't quit Jelani Woods. Can you quit Jelani Woods, Ryan? Is this a player that, when you think about it too, it's he's basically free right now. Tight end 27 at the 16-12. Is he a dart throw worth making at that point in drafts this year?
I like that you already knew that I'm ready to get hurt again by this guy. I got hurt a little bit by him last year. Like you said, the profile, the offense, all very interesting, especially when I think of an RPO in my head. You can hand off to Jonathan Taylor. You have Michael Pittman running some kind of in-breaking route over the linebacker. Then you have Jelani Woods slipping up the seam, and That's all very appealing to me. And yes, if he's free in drafts, I'm going to take him. I'm going to get hurt by him. I'll end up being overweight on him. No question.
But I mean, he's the type of player that's worth being hurt on, right? I mean, like if you want to, if you're going to die on the fantasy hill where you're looking up at other people, you want to die with the players that have that ceiling level that can get you to that point. And I think that, his ADP and the price that you're paying for him right now, you don't really factor in how heavy of a passing game the Colts are going to have this year. You factor that in with Michael Pittman. You factor that in with Adonai Mitchell. You don't factor that in with Jelani Woods in the 16th round, right? So I think that makes perfect sense. That and I'm with you, by the way, on this. I'll probably be drafting a healthy amount of Jelani Woods this year. I have been drafting a healthy amount of him so far late in drafts, and especially with the FFPC tight end premium leagues, if I was playing in those, I'd definitely be looking at him hardcore on the 16th round. So we know where you stand in Jelani Woods. Where do you stand on other players like Brandon Aiyuk, like Eric Gray, like Travis Kelce? Let's get to that in the next segment. He's Ryan Reynolds, established run player profiler, Ryan Reynolds NFL on the X. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on the Better Sports Network right after this.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Ja'Marr Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Persall and Jaxon, Smith-Njigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there has told me that. So that's what's up.
25 minutes until the top of the hour. Here you are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, being joined tonight by Ryan Reynolds at Ryan Reynolds NFL on the X of Establish the Run. And I did not realize this, Ryan, as I'm looking at the X right now. This is breaking news that you are now doing some work and have joined Player Profiler.
Yeah, I'm going to do a top 150 once a month there, do some podcasts and maybe dabble in some other things. Looking forward to joining the team over there.
And it's an exciting team. Many of these guys have come on our show before to co-host with me. We saw some guys on here, like Dan Williamson from Player Profiler was on last week as well. And I love everything that they're doing over there. I love the fact that they've added such a great mind as yours to the conversation there. And I know a lot of people are going to be better fantasy players from watching you and reading everything that you have to say, or to write, I should say, over at playerprofiler.com. Hey, I want to remind everybody, we've been talking a lot about ADPs tonight, at least in the first segment. If you are looking to get into the Fantasy Pros Championship, you can win a $1 million grand prize. It's a $6 million prize pool. Go to myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. We got drafts going off tonight. We already have one going on right now. There's another one starting, I think, in a little bit less than an hour. And then I'm commissioning the 10 o'clock draft tonight and the midnight draft tonight. Just scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to myffpc.com. Register, have some fun, draft some teams. Now, will you be drafting San Francisco players specifically like Brandon Aiyuk. I think this is a good guy to get us going on where do you stand on tonight, Ryan, because this is a player, as we are looking at what's going on. Ian Rappaport reported a couple of days ago that at the start of mandatory minicamp for the 49ers, Brandon Aiyuk was not there. Justin Jefferson just got paid, and Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb are probably not far behind him. Apparently Aiyuk, and this is reported, I don't know, this could be an agent fed information here, that he is looking for a deal similar to what Amon-Ra St. Brown received from the Detroit Lions. He is going to earn just over $14 million this year on his fifth-year option for his contract. Justin Jefferson got paid recently. Devontae Smith got paid. Jaylen Waddle got paid. All these guys have new contracts, and Aiyuk might be looking at the $28 to $30 million level for where he's getting paid, that, similar to what Jaylen Waddle and Amon-Ra St. Brown received. His next option, if he does not get what he's looking for, is to hold out for training camp. Now, we know based on the collective bargaining agreement, this does not really, it's not a useful tool to hold out in training camp right now. The question here is, how do we exploit this for fantasy? Do we let him fall? Do we pick him where he's being drafted right now? Do we pick him a little bit higher where he's being drafted right now? Brandon Aiyuk is wide receiver 16 at the 306 in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Now, Ryan, this is in a glut of 5 different receivers. Well, really 6 different receivers. You have Aiyuk there. You also have Pittman, we talked about last segment, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Waddle, and DJ Moore. So when you're looking at Brandon Aiyuk in that sort of like I said, like that glut there, does he stand out more than the other ones because he's fallen because of this potential contract dispute that he's having with the Niners? Or is this a player that you would want to see him fall a little bit more before you start picking him off in drafts?
I think he'll probably be a guy where I'll buy the dip if he dips more. I hate where Jaylen Waddle's going because I want to be like loaded on him. But gun to head, I'd roll the dice on Jaylen Waddle over Brandon Aiyuk personally. Pittman, I think I might rather take too, but that's close. I'd have Aiyuk on top of the rest of that group, though.
So Aiyuk could be ahead of those guys.
Yeah,
or the rest of the group, I should say. Yeah. So that's interesting. And I think so. You think we're experiencing the dip right now, right?
Maybe. I think it could get worse because like people overreact to news, that's a general thing, especially if something pops like in late July, early August. But yeah, this could end up being like the furthest he dips, but I'm personally going to wait to see. I'm going to be a little greedy, see if I can get a little value on him over the coming months.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like he could fall even further. Let's say he signs, let's say the Niners come to an agreement and it's a similar deal to Waddle. It's a similar deal to Amon-Ra St. Brown. How high up do you think he goes? Mid-third right now. How high up do you think he goes? And I guess more importantly, Ryan, how high is too high for Aiyuk if we do find out that he has this contract stability and we know how the Niners value him and we know what he's going to be doing over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'd probably comp him to last year's where Devonta Smith went. He went right around the turn, so I think he could go up a little bit more. I think he could slide up a little bit more. I'm not sure I'd really want him at the turn, but like the truth is, I'm not really super enthusiastic about taking Nico Collins where he is right now either. So I think they're kind of interchangeable.
Now, we don't have this on the rundown, but we should bring this up because I think getting the Texans receivers right this year is going to be paramount to try to, win, $300,000 grand prize in the FFPC best ball tournament, $1 million this year. Nico Collins, you think is going too high right now? Nico Collins, by the way, 304 right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship as wide receiver 14. For context sake, I will tell you that Stephon Diggs is going as wide receiver 22 at the 406. These guys are almost neck and neck about a week ago. There has been a little bit of a development here where Collins has separated himself by about a round now between him and Diggs.
Yeah, I think Nico Collins is good, but I think how people evaluate him from a talent perspective now is a little bit too high for my taste. I would give CJ Stroud most of the credit, frankly. And, again, gun to head, Eric, if you were going to ask me who the most talented receiver of that group was, I think I'd actually say Tank Dell is the toughest cover today.
Wow. Okay.
I think I would.
Now, okay. Now, I'm not going to disagree with that because I
Yeah.
think that all three of these guys are very good receivers.
Yep.
However, for FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship purposes, if you look at Tank Dell, 508, he
Yeah.
is wide receiver 28. This is a player that if you're drafting in this contest, Ryan, you want to be overweight on at that level, right? I shouldn't say that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You said he's the most talented, but the most talented doesn't always necessarily mean the best guy to have in fantasy.
Yeah, agreed. Production doesn't necessarily, dictate how good you are. So I could see, like, for instance, Diggs could see a lot of work in the slot, could see him like actually having the most receptions of the group. But I do think right now, if I'm like an opposing defensive coordinator and an opposing corner, Tank Dell's the one who scares me the most. Right now, I'll buy him around the 5th round, and I'll try to be like, I'm not going to just abandon Diggs and Collins, but I'm going to try to be more like 4 to 6% on him at this particular juncture.
Okay, and that perfectly fine, makes perfect sense to do that with Tank Dell. He's actually going in an area with Amari Cooper, George Pickens, and one Christian Kirk, wide receiver 29 at the 509. Now, the Jaguars let Calvin Ridley go this offseason. He is now a Tennessee Titan. The Jaguars signed Gabe Davis. They drafted Brian Thomas. They have released Zay Jones. Christian Kirk is a guy that I've never really targeted in dynasty trades. I've acquired him in trades because I've always kind of liked him. And I think if you're trying to trade him away, I feel like you can't get true value on him. So maybe I just like Christian Kirk. I'm not willing to take 80 or 90 cents on the dollar for him. But I think this year, especially when there's been so much talk about Trevor Lawrence having a big season this year, I think Christian Kirk could be a beneficiary of that. I would not call him a league winner at the 509 at wide receiver 29, but I do think that this guy is probably going to outperform what he is going to, or where he's going to be drafted in drafts this year. I like Christian Kirk, Ryan. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, out of that group, I'd have him on top as well. Calvin Ridley being gone is obviously a huge bonus. When you go through statistics in the offseason, Evan Ingram's role and usage is like, one of the things that stood out to me the most. Was astonished. Could see that evening out a little bit. Kirk has a much better opportunity than Tank Dell. He's clearly the best receiver of the group. Gabe Davis, I don't care about Gabe Davis at all. I think actually Brian Thomas might be more of a threat long term to Kirk, but I'm kind of with you from a talent perspective. I'm not in love with him, but I've liked him. He's reminded me of Jarvis Landry in the past, and I like Jarvis Landry type receivers. And I'm also going to be heavy on Trevor Lawrence. I expect I have been to this point, so I'm with you on Kirk. I'm definitely taking him at cost right now.
What is it about Lawrence that has you wanting to be overweight on him in best ball drafts? If you look at where he's going, again, I should just switch this to the FFPC best ball tournament ADP, but I'll just do one more with the Fantasy Pros Championship ADP. Trevor Lawrence is a player that's not going until quarterback 16 at the 12-12. And I get it. I mean, it was going much higher last year. But what is it about Lawrence this year? Is it his ADP? What has you so bullish on the Jaguars quarterback?
Well, just in general, he's one of the best quarterbacks of, quarterback prospects of our lifetime, really, so he has an excellent floor. He's shown that he can do it. I watch, I'm a sicko. I've watched every snap of every game since 2014. There's, you could compile like 5 plays where he was a few inches off of a pass where he'd have, 600 more yards and, a few more touchdowns. So
Wow.
I see that there's a path to like improvement. I always, and just in general, I buy dips in players that are good. Like I don't need to buy a dip in a player I don't care about, but I think like 16's a little extreme. And like I said, if he rises, I'll stay off of him. But for now, I like him at cost.
And I just switched the ADP I'll be using going forward is for the FFPC Best Ball Tournament ADP. He's actually quarterback 15 in that, which, I mean, that's negligible. But, I mean, Jared Goff, Caleb Williams, Brock Purdy, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, they're all going ahead of him. Jordan Love is actually going, when we look at the ADP here, almost 3 rounds ahead of Trevor Lawrence. Now, I like Jordan Love. I mean, I'm based in Northeast Wisconsin, so I'm a Packers fan, definitely, and maybe my green and gold goggles are clouding my judgment on Jordan Love. But even I can tell you that, boy, I don't see 3 rounds of separation between Love and Lawrence this year. I really think Lawrence is a strong buy. You always like to buy the proven player coming off a down year. As you said, buying the dip on a lot of these players. There was a massive dip in 2023 ADP to 2024 ADP with a certain sophomore receiver named Jackson Smith-Njigba, a player that a lot of people were excited about. And you think about what he did at Ohio State: 347 receiving yards in one game, 15 catches in one game, a guy that was, shattering all these Ohio State receiving records. And you think about the receivers that have come through there, even recently, Garrett Wilson and Terry McLaurin and Chris Olave and all these guys. And Smith-Njigba was the guy that had the best numbers of all. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is another guy too. Brady Henderson, who covers the NFL for ESPN, said, quote, "The feeling inside the Seahawks organization was that Jaxon Smith-Njigba has really improved his practice habits." Now, in order to make that significant of a statement that you've really improved your practice habits, this is the NFL, man. I mean, this is razor thin lines between being the best, being good, and being out of the league. So there had to be something noticeable that the Seahawks saw last year. Like, God, I really wish he was watching more film. God, I really wish he was in the weight room more. God, I really wish he was working with his teammates and the quarterback more. I don't know. Any or all those could be true. But the fact that Henderson comes out and states this makes me think that there was something that was a recurrent thing last year in Seattle. Mike McDonald, who granted was not there last year, he was in Baltimore. He's the new head coach in Seattle. He said Smith-Njigba's work ethic has been, quote, awesome. 62 catches, 628 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. He is still behind DK Metcalf, and he's still behind Tyler Lockett, we think, in targets because Lockett signed that extension with the Seattle Seahawks this year. If we look at his FFPC best ball ADP, he's wide receiver 46. Now, he's going in that same Rashee Rice, Keon Coleman area that we talked about in the first segment today. He is going at the 904. It's weird for me to say, are you buying the dip on Smith-Njigba? Because there's a very realistic possibility that what we saw last year is what we get again in 2024. But there are a lot of people out there, and maybe the Seahawks included, that think this is going to be a better year for JSN. If that's the case, is the 904 the right price to be drafting him at this point, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And, what you just broke down was great news, because I think there's one path here too. And one of those is, he started last year with an injury, started off slow. That's forgivable. But 2 is he underwhelmed a little bit, and maybe that pissed him off this offseason, and that's why he's working harder. And if that's what's behind this, that's wonderful to me. But, in full PPR, I definitely like him more than in half PPR. He's like a Julian Edelman type player. But, the thing I always go back to him is this, and this actually made me like him more as a player. 2 things create separation. Speed, he's not a burner, but his 3-cone drill was out of this world. And change of direction ability is how you create separation. And, you run like a 4-yard in, man. You don't need to break big plays when you're a guy like this. So I think he has a path to, doing well in PPR formats. Like you said, though, the problem is there's so much target competition, and I wouldn't exactly call Geno Smith Drew Brees. So Geno Smith's fine, but a little bit of quarterback volatility and just, target competition there is a little scary. But in the 9th round, in full PPR, I'm in it. And in the 9th round.
Yeah, it's weird because Keon Coleman is the perceived number 1 receiving target in Buffalo, and he's going at the same spot as the perceived number 3 target in Seattle. And I really view Seattle and Buffalo as all that different as far as passing volume this year, it's weird to think about. But Smith-Njigba is an interesting guy. And at the 904, again, if you're drafting in best ball leagues, you're probably drafting in more than one, and getting some Smith-Njigba in the mid-9th is probably a good way to be spending your draft capital. I want to shift our focus to running back here briefly. Pro Football Talk reported that Audric Estime, the rookie running back out of Notre Dame, now playing out in the mountains of Colorado, he is recovering from a small knee scope. Sean Payton, quote from him, head coach: "He'll be available at the start of training camp, so we won't see him working through the rest of OTAs. But on the conservative side, he's going to be just fine. It was all good news." This is not good news that he needed a scope to begin with. But again, if it is just a scope and that's all it is, we're in June. Training camp doesn't start until August, so he should be good by then. The concern here is when you think about how much how many carries, how many touches he had for Notre Dame last year. He was heavily utilized with the Fighting Irish in 2023. He's a young running back. He's only 20 years old. And 2023 was really the most significant volume year for him. So it's not like, he's one of like these Wisconsin Badgers running backs that has all the tread off the tires before they get to the NFL. I would imagine that he will be factoring into the Denver running back conversation. And that is a big conversation as we look at this right now with the Denver Broncos backfield. If we look at or if we analyze the depth chart for Denver right now, you have Javonte Williams, obviously there. Samaje Perine, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, who is getting a lot of love with the FFPC high stakes players, by the way, lately. And another guy that I took in, as a flyer late in some of my rookie drafts, Blake Watson is there as well. So that is 5 different running backs. And I think you can tell yourself a story that these guys are all worth their ADP this year. Let's focus in on Estime. The fact that he was drafted this year, the fact that he was drafted after they knew what they had in Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. How do you feel about Audric Estime right now, Ryan, as he is going in the FFPC best ball tournament late 18th round, running back 70? Again, not a lot of risk it to get that biscuit there, but Estime is an interesting guy. How many darts are you throwing at him this year?
Yeah, I'm going to come at you with this from 3 different angles. The first one is when Sean Payton was in New Orleans, that offense was a little bit more run heavy than most people would probably expect. And part 2 of that is they tend to have, 2-3 man committees when they were in New Orleans. So I could see him factoring in as well. I wouldn't call Javonte Williams and definitely not Samaje Perine insurmountable objects. Mm-hmm. So if either of them starts slow, he could inch in and gain some usage share there. My concern for this season is if and when Bo Nix plays, especially veteran head coaches are less likely to play rookie running backs unless they're good in pass protection, because they already have a volatile situation at quarterback. They want stability there. So if Nix plays, I think he probably takes more of a back seat, but I'm going to be more interested in him next year for sure.
Let me ask you the question this way. If we look at the Denver backfield, we see right now 4 run. This is semi crazy. Hold on. I could be wrong on this. I am wrong on this. This is massively crazy. 5 running backs are being drafted right now in the FFPC best ball tournament. Javonte Williams, 906. Jaleel McLaughlin, 1410. Audric Estime, 1811. Samaje Perine, 1903. Blake Watson at the 2001. Knowing all those ADPs, which one sounds the best if you only were firing one bullet in the FFPC best ball tournament at a Denver Broncos running back? Which one of those ADPs sounds best to you?
Making me do it with one team is very interesting, because with volume, I'd probably have more Javonte Williams than anyone else, but one team, we want to target ambiguous backfields when we can get someone cheap that has a path to a big role. So I think out of that group, I would take Estime in round 18 over the other options.
Estime is an interesting guy this year for sure. And the fact is, I know there's a lot of Blake Watson truthers out there, but the fact is, and there's no getting around this, they drafted Estime and then they signed Watson afterwards too. So you have to look at that about how the team values each player. Michael Murphy right now watching us on X. How do I get a job with you guys? LOL. You definitely can get a job with us. Just send your resume to support@myffpc.com. We'll try to find something for you. And maybe you could be on this show as well. But right now we're focusing on the mind of Ryan Reynolds. And the way I want to attack this next thing is, well, not necessarily the way, but the issue that I think a lot of people are facing is, how do we handle the Giants backfield now that Saquon Barkley is no longer a part of it, right? Barkley is in Philadelphia. The Giants didn't make a big splashy free agent signing. They did make a free agent signing. I wouldn't call it splashy. They didn't necessarily draft a guy super high up in the NFL draft. And I know there's a lot of people, Ryan, that were all about Tyrone Tracy, right? They kept talking about Tracy. He is going to be huge wherever he lands. This was in the pre-draft process. And then he ends up landing in New York, a player that was a really good receiver at Purdue and then ended up being a running back for Iowa and had a really good season in 2023. So he was a player I was kind of focusing on my dynasty rookie drafts. But then I look at Eric Gray and Pat Leonard from the New York Daily News, who was covering the Giants OTAs, said that Eric Gray is getting a lot of run with the first team offense. Devin Singletary, who was the guy that the Giants did sign, was there, but Gray was also working in the first team offense in Singletary's stead as well. Dan Dugan, who covers the Giants for The Athletic, says Gray has a clear path to have a bigger role this year. And Gray, bear in mind, did not have a banner 2023, 2.8 yards per attempt for rushing. He was all right in the passing game, 6 catches out of 7 targets, and his 3 pass protection reps, he won all of them as well. I was listening to Abibag Batoba and Dio the Machine on the First and 15 show with Player Profiler, actually. And they were talking about how a lot of people are kind of underrating Eric Gray right now, whether that's because Singletary is the perceived starter, whether that's because Tracy is the sexy rookie that you want to get in your drafts right now. But they said, don't sleep on Eric Gray. Now, Eric Gray is running back 73 at the 1904 right now in the FFPC best ball tournament, Ryan. There are a lot of people sleeping on him. Are they right, or should we not be sleeping on this player?
No, in the 19th round, I like that. I mean, we're talking about surmountable objects. Devin Singletary had a nice year in Houston, but he's not in Buffalo anymore for a reason. They went in a different direction because he's a replaceable guy. So Giants offensive line should be a little bit better this year. Eric Gray, like you said, he was underwhelming last year. He's very productive in college. He's not really an explosive player, but he's solid. So, again, we want to target ambiguous backfields. I want some shares of each of these options because they're all like pretty cheap at this point. But yeah, in round 19, I'm definitely interested in Eric Gray.
When you say you want shares of them, all shares of them, running back 35, 1005, Devin Singletary, you still want to be in business at that point with some of your best ball drafts?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your build, but yeah, I mean, like if I have, say, a 0 running back team, I'm going to take something ugly like Devin Singletary around there. Sure.
Ugly Singletary. I love it. I absolutely love it. John Terry, by the way, with Ryan Reynolds joke number 2. How is Blake Lively doing, Ryan? Can you let us give us any insight on that?
My answer, John, is I wish I knew. Sincerely wish I knew.
So you and I'm a happily married man. Yeah, I wish I knew how she was doing.
Hey, listen, that's fine. That I think everyone would accept that, Eric.
Yes, they would. What a tough thing that people are trying to accept this year, and this is the first time I've seen this in the FFPC best ball tournament. Maybe because the FFPC best ball tournament hasn't been around for like 10 years or anything like that. But I can't remember a time, again, in a tight end premium format, where the tight ends are getting 1.5 catches, 1.5 points per catch. I can't remember a time when no tight ends were going in the first round, but that's exactly what we're looking at right now. It's crazy. The first 12 picks, none of them are tight ends. Now, Sam Laporta on average is going at the 202. So he is very, very close to being a first round pick. But then you get Kelce, McBride, Kincaid, Andrews. Those guys are all going in the second round. Kyle Pitts a little bit later in the third in the FFPC best ball tournament. Travis Kelce has been a mainstay in the first round of FFPC drafts for the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. And now he has slipped to the 204 right now in drafts. I know age has something to do with it. I know Xavier Worthy has something to do with it. I know Rashid Rice has something to do with it. Your thoughts on being able to get Travis Kelce at the 204 right now? Where do you stand on him at that ADP, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation. He turns 35 in October, and maybe dating Taylor Swift is a similar experience to drinking from the fountain of youth. Maybe that's that whole thing's knocking some years off for him. But 35 years old is kind of unprecedented for productive tight ends. So the floor is definitely scary. The upside's definitely fascinating. Like you said, target competition's big. I like Hollywood Brown a lot. So I think the guy I want the most shares of in that offense is still him, but I'm not going to completely ignore Kelce, even though at some point the wheels are going to fall off the bus a bit here.
I want to bring this up too, as long as we're talking tight ends here. Jonnu Smith got signed by the Miami Dolphins a couple of months ago, 3 months ago or so, to be their got signed by Miami to be their tight end this year. Now, Mike McDaniel's offensive system in Miami has never really given us a relevant, with capital letters, tight end. 2022, Mike Gesicki, 32 catches, 360 yards, 5 touchdowns. That was okay. 2023, it was worse. Now, Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith were the tight end tandem in Atlanta last year. Jonnu Smith, again, this is Arthur Smith, whatever. 50 catches, 580 yards, 3 touchdowns on 70 targets. He had 11.6 yards per reception. This was a career high in targets. This is a career high in receptions and a career high in yards, 58% snap share for Jonnu Smith last year. He's going to be 29. He can earn up to $10 million on his new contract. If we look at the best ball tournament at the FFPC ADP, Jonnu Smith, tight end 26 at the 1505. Is this a sleeping giant this year in Miami, or is this just going to be the Hill and Waddle show again?
I mean, I've been hurt by Jonnu Smith before. When Bill Belichick went out of his way to sign him and said he's, I think, the best yak tight end in the league, I fell for it big time. But Mike McDaniel comes from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. When McDaniel was in San Francisco, George Kittle, one of the best all-around tight ends of all time. Jonnu Smith's kind of like a lower middle class version of George Kittle, good blocker, good athlete, etc. So he fits in this offense from a football perspective. I love the question. I love the fit. It's kind of the first real tight end Miami's had for this system. Yep. For fantasy purposes, I'm not sure he's going to be playable at all week in, week out. But for best ball, I could see him having a couple of spike weeks, especially if Hill or Waddle miss some time. So I love the fit for football purposes, but for fantasy, I'm probably more optimistic than most, but not really running to pick him up though.
So if you're more optimistic than most and you're still not running, this is a guy that I don't want to say you can fade, but this is a guy that you can look past and grab some other upside tight ends at this point, right?
Yeah, especially in the 15th round. I know it's tight end premium, but yeah, in the 15th round, I'm not really super excited about that. Now, if he was in the 19th or the 20th, that, I'm much more excied about that.
Absolutely. The last player I want to bring up here is Daniel Jones. He is going right now, quarterback 29 at the 1608. Jordan Renan, who covers the New York Giants, reports that Daniel Jones says he, quote, doesn't have any doubt about being ready to play in week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, he tore his ACL in November. He's been active at OTAs. 7-on-7 drills. Daniel Jones was out there. He is in the second year of a 4-year, $160 million contract that he signed this past offseason. But 900 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 picks in 6 games last year. It wasn't all his fault. The offensive line was not great. The receiving core was not great. They're got a big boost with Malik Neighbors in 2024, the 6th overall pick. His rushing upside, I think, is something that we don't talk about enough. This is a guy that with his legs can get you a lot of fantasy points. That is going to be potentially impacted by how healthy his knee is going to be for the 2024 season. And if the Giants offense gets back to what they were doing in 2022, all of a sudden you could be looking at a pretty nice buy here. Daniel Jones, again, he's going late, quarterback 29, but at the 1608, sounds like this is a player that we should be in business with.
Yeah, in general season long, I'm not really interested, but in best ball, I love Daniel Jones this year. Don't really like him as a player, never have. You can go back to his college tape when he played Virginia. Unless they game plan for pressure, he has no feel in that phase. It's been the silent killer for quarterbacks. Always been a problem for him. But like you said, offensive line's looks like it's gonna be better this year. Best wide receiver group he's ever played with. Not only does Neighbors give him a top option, but the Giants are purposely stacking speed. They have a really good sneaky group, and like you said, the rushing upside, 6, 7, 800 yards. I love him at current cost. Because even if he fails, like it's so what, you're taking him in the 16th round. He doesn't kill you if he fails.
He doesn't kill you if he fails for sure. And I think that's, it's weird because we're often looking for upside, at that point of the draft. But with the quarterback position, I think it's a little bit different. And I think that is a player that you can not necessarily look to target, but feel good about, again, depending upon how your team build looks at that point with the quarterback position. And I'd be totally comfortable with Daniel Jones at this point. We're just getting comfy cozy with every thing that we've been talking about tonight. One of the things we have not talked a whole lot about has been the running back situations, the RBBC situations around the NFL. I want to find out, we'll play a game of Would You Rather Draft, the Backfield edition with Ryan Reynolds from Player Profiler Established Run. Let's get into the Lions running backs. Let's get into the Rams running backs. There's a three-headed monster in Miami we haven't talked about yet. Let's do that next. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. He's Ryan Reynolds. I'm Eric Balkman. We're talking more right after this.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Ja'Marr Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jaxon, Smith-Njigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there has told me that. So that's what's up. Get set up.
Nine minutes past the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman. You know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I'm being joined by Ryan Reynolds. He of PlayerProfiler.com and Establish the Run. You follow him on the X at Ryan Reynolds NFL. FFPC Empire Leagues have arrived. They are dynasty leagues with a large progressive prize pool that grows annually. It's only awarded once there is a back-to-back winner. When that happens, the back-to-back champion not only gets that year's prize pool, but they will get the progressive prize pool that happens as half the pot is set aside each and every year. And then the league disbands. Everybody gets their deposits back, and they are free to join a new FFPC Empire League. I got to tell you, I am really surprised at how many people have signed up for these leagues. They've been growing in popularity. Check it out at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. We have talked a lot about receivers. We have talked a lot about tight ends and quarterbacks tonight. We've touched on running backs a little bit, Ryan, but I really want to get into the nitty-gritty here with these shared backfields where, we know there's a 1-2 punch, and we know that one of these guys might outperform their draft slot where the other one may not, or may just, hit their draft capital value. Let's do Detroit to kick things off tonight. When it comes to Detroit, they are one of the best offenses in the NFL. They are a team that should be even better in 2024 than they were in 2023. But you look at the disparity between Gibbs and Montgomery right now. Jahmyr Gibbs has ascended to running back 4 at the 111 in the FFPC best ball tournament. David Montgomery is not going until running back 21 at the 702. For the purposes of this conversation, let's assume you're only drafting one of these players from each team. Who is the better draft pick? Is it Gibbs at the running back 4 or is it in the first round, or is it David Montgomery, running back 21 in the 7th round?
I have Gibbs at running back 4, so that's, I'll call that disappointing that he's reached that zenith already.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really planning on drafting Montgomery much. I was high on him last year. But just based on value and ADP, I would rather take Montgomery at cost than Gibbs currently if I was just taking one team.
Is it because that when we look at the numbers at the end of the year, Montgomery is actually going to be a lot closer to Gibbs than how they're being drafted right now? I know that Gibbs is definitely the more exciting player, but we can't forget about Montgomery.
I think Montgomery can have double-digit touchdowns. I don't think they're going to perform all that closely unless Gibbs misses time. But Montgomery could flirt with 1,000 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns, and just again, I think you're basically buying Gibbs at cost. Essentially, this is kind of where he should be.
Let's move across to the NFC West, and maybe this is an easier conversation. I'm actually really surprised, and normally I don't like to tell my guests where I stand on this, but I'll let you know right now. I am really nervous about Kyren Williams, not necessarily what he's going to do this year, but I'm a little bit nervous about where he's going in drafts. Running back 9 at the 302. Now, he has fallen a little bit in the FFPC best ball tournament. You don't have to go back too far to see him being drafted at the end of the 2nd round, and now he's fallen on into the 3rd, going at the 302. He actually kind of was a little bit lower than 302 recently, but he's moved up a little bit, which is kind of weird. Running back 9 at the 302 for Kyren Williams. Not sure I want to do that, but running back 38 at the 10-11 for Blake Corum, a player the Rams coaching staff has already reportedly told him that they want him to develop a 3-down skill set. Man, I really like that value for Corum. I'm out on Kyren Williams. How do you feel?
Yeah, my guy Nick Botifer 2 years ago was the first person I saw show any enthusiasm to Kyren Williams, and that brings me to the point that with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, we kind of have to treat them as like their own entity.
Mm-hmm.
Puka Nacua is a very good player, but I don't think this would be what happened last year would have happened in most NFL cities. If you're a smart football player and you're not the greatest athlete in the world, they'll get the most out of you, those two guys. That's where Kyren Williams falls. The injury situation's sounds like a nightmare. But that said, smart football player, super productive last year. Don't think he's irreplaceable at all. So yes, at cost, I'm with you. I'd rather have Blake Corum, even though I'll go back to the running back thing with pass protection. Matt Stafford's a traditional pocket passer. They're going to go with the veteran until they trust the rookie in a lot of situations, but they didn't draft Corum to not play him.
Mm-hmm. Is Blake Corum going to be one of those guys where after September we're kind of like, God, what a wasted draft pick, but after October we're like, oh God, what a great value?
I think it can be a little bit like Cam Akers in that sense, where he didn't really do anything early on, and then he started to show that he was the best player in that group his rookie year, and his role increased. That's probably what we're in store for here with Corum too.
Yeah, you always got to draft the guy behind the guy in Los Angeles, right? Draft Akers, draft Kyren Williams, and now draft Blake Corum as the ADP would dictate at this point. The only 3-headed running back situation that I'm going to bring up in this segment tonight is in Miami. And this is, my goodness, it's just it's fascinating and maddening. It's fascinating, essentially, when we look at what's going to happen with Miami this year. Devon Achane, running back 8, going at the 301 in the FFPC best ball tournament right now. You don't want to take him? Okay, that's fine. Mostert, running back 28 at the 812. That is basically 6 rounds later. You don't like either of those guys? Okay, you can wait and take Jaylen Wright as running back 46 at the 1207, which is super late. Who would you rather draft given those ADPs? And the second part of the question for you, Ryan, would you ever entertain in a best ball format where you're trying to beat out thousands of other people like the FFPC best ball tournament? Would you ever entertaining drafting 2 of those 3 as well?
That's a good question on both fronts. I'm taking Mostert at current cost. Age is a little concerning, but they're run the hot hand offense. Achane, I'm glad that his ADP's corrected over the last few months because, in the first few drafts, it was out of control how high he was going. In the third round's at least doable. But yeah, Mostert, I think, is going to get first crack, at least early in the season, more often than not. I like his value. He's solid. Now, yes, especially Mostert and Wright, taking the two of them, I don't think that's illegal, no. It's actually a pretty good idea. I wouldn't, again, if you're playing volume, doing things where you're going to get different is important. And especially, you're getting two pieces of a high quality offense. If Achane goes down, you're in business. And then that's a situation too where if Mostert goes down, you still have a guy who's probably going to play because Achane's a bit like Tony Pollard. I don't see him taking 20 totes a week for a month, So
Yeah.
I like that idea. I might dabble in that a little bit myself.
Now, when I mentioned, would you take two of these three running backs? You focused on Mostert and Wright. Why did Achane not fall into that conversation for you at all?
I think you could do Achane and Wright. Achane and Mostert would be a bit expensive for me.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, just for me, that kind of guy where I don't really want to take him in the third round. I'll probably take a little bit of him just because I don't fade anyone, generally speaking, when I play volume. But he's going to be a spike week guy where he gets you 28 one week and maybe 4 the next. So especially in season long, I'm not super enthusiastic.
This is a good philosophical best ball question. You said in best ball you don't fade anyone. Can you tell us a little bit what that means and why you opt to draft your teams that way?
Well, we're smart guys, Eric, right? But we also have to.
I don't know about me. You definitely are.
Well, we have to be open to the prospect that we don't know everything. So if I'm drafting hundreds of best ball teams, like I don't want to be killed by someone that I ignored when I'm wrong, because I've been wrong before. Not always, Eric, but I've been wrong before. So just try to basically like not be too overconfident in what I do when I play with volume. But if I'm doing one team, if I'm doing 5 teams, I'm letting it rip completely.
How would you let it rip in Green Bay this year? Because Aaron Jones, it wasn't that long ago that Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams were the 1-2 punch in Green Bay, but things, Ferris Bueller would say, things move pretty fast around here. Now it's Josh Jacobs and MarShawn Lloyd this year. And if we look at the ADPs for these guys, Josh Jacobs is going all the way up as running back 12 at the 311. MarShawn Lloyd, running back 45 at the 1205. Again, you are looking at 8+ rounds separating these two players. Given the draft capital in FFPC best ball tournaments, how would you handle, or in the FFPC best ball tournament, how would you handle the Green Bay backfield? Is Jacobs the better buy, or is MarShawn Lloyd the better buy?
I think Jacobs is fine at 311, so that would be more of a build question. If I go with 2 receivers to start, I'm probably good with taking Jacobs in a lot of situations. If I've taken a running back in the first 2 rounds, I'm going to skip Jacobs, and I'd rather take the dart throw with Lloyd because, you're a Packers fan. Congratulations. As long as Jordan Love is even 90% of what he was last year, they are a very, very, very interesting team. I'm going to say this. I'm not sure how you feel about it. I think this would have been the best roster Aaron Rodgers ever had, except for maybe in his very early career. But this is a great roster. It really is.
Yeah, no, 100% I'd agree with that. I think about back to, not that I want to turn this into a Packers show, but you think about when he was winning the Super Bowl, Donald Driver, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, Jermichael Finley. It was insane, the pass catchers that they had. And I don't know what happened. At some point, Green Bay just decided, you know what, you're Aaron Rodgers. You're good enough to make whatever crap we put on the field better. And he did. It wasn't enough to win a Super Bowl, but he did. And then, towards the end of his career, I think they kind of realized that this is a marriage that is not going to last very much longer. And then I'm sure Rodgers, he had to be a little ticked that the first year that Jordan Love takes over, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Christian Watson was the year before, Romeo Doubs was the year before, but then Jaden Reed as well, Dontavian Wicks, who would have been a borderline first-round pick had he come out the year before. So, it should only get better. I'm always, again, I think a lot of those guys punched above their weight a little bit last year. I think we're looking at a situation where Jordan Love has done a really good job at finding the open receiver, and you'd like to think that the sky's the limit. I often, see these situations in fantasy football as Well, they were so good last year. Could they possibly be better this coming year? Yes, it's possible. I don't necessarily know if I see it, and I don't have a good explanation. If they're not as good as they were last year, I'm going to sit here and say, yeah, I don't know why that is. I just know that these things fluctuate, right? But I do love the cast that they have in Green Bay. I think the Jacobs thing is interesting. I don't know if you follow the NBA, but there's been an allegory to what the Bucks did with trading Drew Holiday to get Damian Lillard. And what did the Packers do? They let Aaron Jones go to bring in Josh Jacobs. On paper, it should be better. Paper is not where these games are played. So Packers, for the second straight year, I think are going to be a fascinating team to watch, not only the backfield, but the pass catchers as well in Green Bay. One of the hot button backfields in the NFL this year, since the NFL draft, has been Buffalo. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw from James Cook last year? I know there's a lot of people talking about how inefficient of a running back that he was, and then the fact that they bring in Ray Davis this year. As you know, it's not like he was a second round pick or anything, but he wasn't like a late day 3 pick. So, he's going to factor into it. I know there's talk about Josh Allen and Ray Davis, sort of taking over the goal line role where James Cook may not get these short yardage touchdowns anymore. James Cook right now, as I look at the FFPC best ball tournament ADP, running back 14 at the 502, whereas you can get Ray Davis running back 51 at the 1311. Who's the better buy there? Is it Cook or is it Davis, Ryan Reynolds?
Cook in his rookie year really didn't impress me at all. He did at times last year. Buffalo's kind of an interesting offense in the sense because, like, for a lot of offenses, I'm more interested in consistent backs where Cook's more of a spike play back. I think in Buffalo, the way their offense runs, that's fine, and that's probably what they want. With Davis, Latavius Murray is in there, Damian Harris is in there. I think he probably has the lead in taking over that role. And, with what you said about Josh Allen seeding goal line work, I mean, that probably should have happened years ago.
Right.
Because, at some point, like, this dude's a madman. You got to protect him from himself. And if he's hurt, you're winning 2 games. It's like when Peyton Manning missed the year and Lance Painter took over. Like, guess what? Buffalo might actually stink without Josh Allen. So they should do that, but I'm not sure if they're going to. And I don't know why at this point they're not trying to ease the hits that he takes.
Oh God, I'm having like Curtis Painter PTSD right now. I'm like bringing that up. It's really amazing too. And I know you've been doing this for a while, but I hear names brought up like for my terrestrial radio show I do. It's a sports radio show, all sports in Northeast Wisconsin. We were out at the Fox City Stadium in Appleton, Wisconsin today, ahead of the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, which is the high A affiliate of the Milwaukee Brewers today. And I was talking with their left fielder on the air who wanted to play college baseball at West Virginia. And I'm like, West Virginia? He's like, oh, yeah, I grew up watching them. And he brought up Geno Smith and Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey, for God's sake, right? I'm like, holy cow. Again, that was another PTSD moment. Like all these guys I was drafting in the late first and early second rounds of my dynasty rookie drafts. I'm like, all right, we got to switch the topic back to baseball because this was bad. Just crazy stuff. But like, it's weird how you hear these names many years later and how it just rings like, fingernails on a chalkboard or just absolute bliss. It's crazy. What's going to be absolute bliss in New Orleans this year? Alvin Kamara, a player that I cannot trade for anything in my dynasty leagues right now. Nobody is willing to give me anything for him. And then you have Kendra Miller too, a player that I know a lot of people were in on at this point last year, especially in the rookie drafts, as a guy that maybe could take over as the 3-down running back in New Orleans. He's running back 43 at the 1202. Much later is where he's going in drafts after Alvin Kamara, running back 16 at the 508. Who is the Saints running back that you'd rather have this year, man?
I think they're both at a good cost. My concern with the Saints is, Dennis Allen's on the short list of coaches that get fired before the season ends.
Yes,
and if that happens, Kendre Miller's maybe he's getting a long look towards the end of the year and during money-making season. So I actually kind of like both of them at cost, even though I'm not a Saints bull at all. But I'll lean Miller just because I do think, if we're talking about coaches to get fired in season, I think it's Allen's like towards the top of the list.
Miller at the 1202. I'm going to sort this so I can see what other running backs are going around him, because I think he is a little bit underrated right now. If we look at, again, 11th round, 12th round, you're seeing Ezekiel Elliott, Zach Charbonnet, and Jerome Ford, Rico Dowdle, the aforementioned MarShawn Lloyd and Jaylen Wright. It's weird because I kind of like Miller, Lloyd, and Wright more than I do Dowdle, Ford, and Charbonnet, who are actually going ahead of Kendra Miller right now. But Miller's an interesting guy. And again, if you're a volume drafter, you're sprinkling a lot of these guys in a lot of your leagues this year. But Miller's a very interesting guy at the 1202. Speaking of Zach Charbonnet, let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks here. For the second straight year, I remember when we were covering this on the Better Sports Network last year, the shockwaves that went through us when we saw Zach Charbonnet was being selected by the Seattle Seahawks in the second round, after they took Kenneth Walker from Michigan State in the second round the previous year. If we look at the ADPs right now, Kenneth Walker, running back 17. He's going at the end of the 5th round in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament. Charbonnet, running back 41 at the end of the 11th round. You're looking at 6 rounds of separation between Walker and Charbonnet. Is that enough for you to say, hey, you want Charbonnet over Walker, or is it still Walker here? And pass catching, I think, goes into this as well, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like both guys at both spots, but like you said, the cluster around Charbonnet, I don't think I'd have him at the head of that either. So I'll lean Walker. 5'11 is pretty solid for Walker, especially if you're taking a wide receiver heavy team and you just need someone who brings you some stability.
Who is gonna? And I should have this up on my screen, and I don't yet. Who's gonna have the more catches between Walker and Charbonnet this year? Is Charbonnet going to be on the field enough to get more catches than Walker?
I would say, like, if I was going to predict all of it, I'd say yes, Charbonnet will have more catches. I'd probably still say like a 60-40 type split in Walker's favor. So,
and I look at it, and right now, last year, Charbonnet 33 catches, Walker 29. Yeah. So the difference is negligible there. And if we look again, this is last year. We're always looking forward, but I do want to bring this up. Kenneth Walker, 900 rushing yards last year to Zach Charbonnet's 460. I know touchdowns are not a sticky stat, but rushing touchdowns, KW3 had 8, Charbonnet had 1. Right. Now, and we know the disparity between these two players as far as the draft position go. It's about 6 rounds or so. So you know what you're paying for there. But you're saying Walker over Charbonnet?
Yeah, I think it would depend on Bill, but
in a vacuum, would you say Walker over Charbonnet?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now an interesting one in Minnesota. Already mentioned this. Josh Jacobs signs with Green Bay. Aaron Jones ends up signing with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I know in my heart of hearts, I wanted to see Aaron Jones back on the Packers this year. And I think Brian Gutekunst, the GM for the Packers, if you listen to how he's talked about this, I think he expected and wanted Jones back this year as well. When it was clear that that was not going to happen, they went out and got Josh Jacobs, and less than a day later, Aaron Jones was a Minnesota Viking. As excited as I was to see Aaron Jones wrap off 5 straight 100-yard rushing games last year to end the season, I also understand that Aaron Jones, had the Packers beaten the Niners, would not have been available in the NFC Championship game because he sustained a pretty serious soft tissue injury. That would have been his 3rd soft tissue injury of the 2023 season. That is not great. The best ability is availability. And while I look at it from the standpoint now where I'm like, Jones was so great at the end of last season, but I also understand that we're on to a new season. He's 30 years old. I'm not really, and the Packers have moved on from him. The Packers are infamous for moving on from players like a year early rather than a year late. Yeah. And he goes to the Vikings. Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy at quarterback there. But the injuries really concerns me. I have been saying for years, Ryan, Aaron Jones is undervalued in drafts. You need to be drafting Aaron Jones because he's going to outperform his draft value. He is going as late as I can remember. Running back 18 at the 605. I don't think he's undervalued this year. In fact, I am full fading him right now. I know you don't like to do that for best ball, but I am finding somebody else I like better. And Ty Chandler, running back 48 at the 1308. I know he needs an Aaron Jones injury to be relevant, but I never like to predict injuries, especially from one of my favorite Packers and Aaron Jones. I don't think this is the year of Jones, man. I really like Chandler at that end of the 13th round, and I'm not really targeting Aaron Jones in the mid-6th.
I like that. I do. I like that. I didn't know the soft tissue thing. I didn't, especially at his age, running backs begin to fade at this time too. But there's one thing that I like about Aaron Jones, and that is in week 17, he has a home game against the Packers in money-making season,
Right,
the week that
yes.
you win champions. He's in a contract year too. That's going to be a full throttle game for him in terms of availability. I could see him underwhelming for most of the year. I'm with you on that. I don't really want him either. But for that game, I'm very interested in him. So, for regular season long leagues, you can trade for, big tournaments. You can't, which is the way it should be. But I don't really have a ton of interest in either of them. So I'm going to go the other way. I'll take Jones in the 6th round just for that matchup primarily.
There was a game against the Dallas Cowboys in 2019 that the Packers played. Aaron Jones had 4 touchdowns that game. And there was a play he made down the sideline where he looked like a wide receiver. He went up and high pointed a ball, beat the defender, went in for a touchdown. This was on the road. This is at Jerry World. And I'm like, we are witnessing Packers greatness here. Like we'll never see a running back like this again. And I think that game has kind of clouded me on Jones. I know he's explosive. If you're going to tell me Aaron Jones was going to be healthy for all 17 games or the first 17 games of the season this year, he's a 2nd round pick. No question, inarguably a 2nd round pick. We don't know that. And that's why he's going in the 6th round. So I get it why you're saying in the 6th round. I'm staying away, but I respect your decision to do that as well. Let's get into one more here. Arizona. James Conner is the mainstay. Trey Benson is the newcomer here. James Conner right now, as far as the ADP goes, running back 23 at the 708. Trey Benson, running back 32 at the 908. This ADP has already tightened up since the NFL draft. James Conner is a guy that he's one of those players where if you're going with 0 RB, if you're going with waiting on running back, he was always the perfect guy to go with because you knew he was going to be out there. You knew he was going to get touchdowns. He's going to get some catches. He's going to chew up some yardage. He's getting to that low, like a poor man's Michael Turner accumulator role, which you don't necessarily like, but it gets the job done for half the weeks out of the year. But now Trey Benson's there. How does this affect James Conner? And more importantly, who would you rather draft, Conner in the 7th or Trey Benson in the 9th?
I'm very much aligned on this. My answer is build wise. If I have a 0 running back team where I'm still weak at that point, I'm going to take James Conner just for stability. He's a passing game asset too, and you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and you have McBride, and then very little else. So that I'm interested in. But like, say if I take a team where I have Bijan Robinson as the headliner, or even like Jonathan Taylor, I'm going to be more interested in taking Trey Benson. So, but one team though, I think I lean security with James Conner.
Kev Wheeler saying, "Give me all the Benson." And I will say this. I have been burned on drafting these rookie running backs in redraft leagues only to see them outperform what I thought they were going to do the following year. And I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but I do know that this was kind of an underwhelming running back class. And if Benson shows that he is capable, well, here's the other thing, Ryan, we should bring this up too as well. We talk about one of the most difficult things for a rookie running back to get under control is pass pro, right? They have to be able to keep the quarterback from being killed. Is that overrated when you have a quarterback like Kyler Murray that has shown joystick skills in in his ability to get away from defenders? If that's the case, maybe Trey Benson does get on the field a little bit more than James Conner because they know that Kyler Murray's mobile enough to get away from some of these defenders.
Yeah, it definitely matters less when you have one of those few guys in the league that are, in terms of like evasion, it's him and Lamar Jackson are probably at the top of the list, and Mahomes too. So yes, I do think it matters less with them than it does with like Joe Burrow or Matthew Stafford. Where last year, for instance, I completely faded Chase Brown because he can't block. This year, I'm less worried about it. Where in this situation, it doesn't really scare me off Benson as much as it would in say like with the Rams with Blake Corum early in the year.
I think that this brings up, and by the way, I agree with you on that. Obviously, The other thing I want to bring up, and maybe I'm going to hang on to this till after we come back. We have not talked about the weight loss of Lamar Jackson and the drastic weight loss of Tua Tagovailoa. I want to ask you about those guys and how they're figuring into your best ball teams right now, given weight loss or weight gain could be overrated or underrated in trying to formulate the best team possible. Let's pick your brain on that, Ryan. And I also want to pick your brain on the NFL schedule release and how we can exploit this as fantasy players to try to make sure we have the best possible team when it comes to those money weeks at the end of the season. Ryan Reynolds at Ryan Reynolds NFL on the X. He is from Player Profiler and Established Run. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. We'll talk about those subjects and more. Don't go anywhere. Final segment of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network starts next.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Ja'Marr Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jaxon, Smith-Njigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there has told me that. So that's what's up. Get set up.
You can unlock all the sports content for every single sport, including annual draft guides, including one-on-one expert access in the Discord with the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. Sync your league up to analyze matchups and trends in your leagues. The league generator is integrated with FanJections as well. Daily rankings, weekly rankings. You'll get the valuable position coaches, waiver wire, ownership percentages, projection stats, and tools. You can build better lineups guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year. Use promo code LOCK, L-O-C-K, at fantasyalarm.com/lock. fantasyalarm.com/lock, L-O-C-K. We are talking with Ryan Reynolds, the player. This is so weird. I feel like we're ushering in you to your player profiler position here on the show live tonight. As I don't know when this happened, but I know it was publicly announced on X about an hour and a half ago. So excited to have you on to pick your brain tonight. And of course, we can check out your NFL awards analysis over at establishthерun.com at Ryan Reynolds NFL as well. I teased this before the break. I don't want to do an empty tease. Tua Tagovailoa weight loss. He refuses to say how much weight he has lost. Lamar Jackson reportedly lost 20 pounds as well. These are players that are very different type of quarterbacks. Tagovailoa, the thing is with him, he doesn't do a ton with his legs, but he's able to create with his legs when he needs to. Lamar Jackson, one of the biggest weapons is his legs. And how do these quarterbacks hold up over the course of an 18-week season, knowing that their mass is going to be a lot smaller than it was last year? I know Tyreek Hill said that Tua Tagovailoa at the Pro Bowl looked fat as blank, and he caught a lot of weight. I don't know if it was because of that or not, but all we care about is fantasy-wise, how these players are going to look in on our teams this year with with the weight loss. If we look at it right now, you have Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback 16 at the 1102. You'll have Lamar Jackson, quarterback 4 at the 412 right now. Ryan, have you raised, lowered, kept these guys the same regarding the weight loss news that we got in OTAs?
The Lamar Jackson thing is interesting because my question is why did he lose weight? But I'll say this: when he runs, he doesn't take contact very often. And the thing that makes him special, and no one really, him and Michael Vick in the history of the league, if it's 3rd and 13, he can break off runs that no one else can, and that's the biggest difference maker, the biggest attribute that he has that drives his success. But it's true, he doesn't really take a lot of contact. He's not like Jaden Daniels, where you've seen him get murdered in college, taking hits in the open field. Jackson really doesn't, so that doesn't really concern me too much. And with him, I buy dips whenever they happen with him because, just like I tend to buy him in the MVP market at least once a year, just about every year, just because he's one of the 3 guys that is going to be in it every year when he's healthy.
Yeah.
With Tua, that's one, maybe Tyreek Hill gave him a complex. That's what that sounds like. Tyreek Hill, he might have had 2,000 yards receiving. He starts talking smack to you. That's the guy who's going to make you money in the short term is Tyreek Hill. So probably gave him a complex, but they don't have the best offensive line, so maybe he's trying to get more nimble. That makes sense to me. I'm not sure that really changes my how often I'm going to draft him, but again, like he has an odd injury history, so you got to bake that in general with Tua.
Yeah, I think that's the case with this situation as well. As difficult as it is for us to play the weight game in the NFL offseason when drafting our teams, one of the other difficult things to play is the schedule game. I have talked with a lot of high stakes players over the years, Ryan. Some are saying, oh, this is great when the schedule gets released because you know what you need to target here in your leagues. You know what players to fade, you know what players to get on your team because we know what this is going to look like at the end of the season. Then I get other players telling me, it's who knows because injuries and because these teams could look very different in December. You think about even was it last year when we thought there was going to be this massive Week 17 shootout between was it the Chiefs and Bengals? I could be wrong on this. I think it was Chiefs and Bengals. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say if that wasn't last year, it was the year before.
Maybe it's the year before. Yeah. Could be the year before, and it didn't really come to fruition, right? And so there's at least 2 different schools of thought on this. How do you fall in on this? And I think I know where you're going to go, but how do we glean edges once the NFL schedule gets released in May, because we know what we're really playing for is those money weeks in late December, Ryan?
I mean, say like I have a cluster of players and we'll use say I'm only drafting 5 teams. If a team like the Giants, for instance, has a brutal early schedule like they did last year, that might be an avalanche. Where if the Ravens have a hard schedule and say they start 3 and 4, they're going to probably be fine as long as Lamar Jackson's healthy. So less worried about that in the beginning. This year, the Jets are an interesting one to me. The Jets are a team that need to start hot because if they start 2 and 4, the heat's going to be on Robert Saleh. Heat's going to be on Aaron Rodgers. That's a young team outside of Rodgers. So that's a soft schedule early helps there. And then, for teams like the Steelers and the Patriots, for instance, we already don't really want a ton of exposure to those players unless we're getting them at a discount. But you're in the hard schedule on top of it, especially when it happens late. And then, I'm going to be less likely to take them. I use it as a tiebreaker in a lot of situations.
I think it's important to understand that while the scheduled release is important, like anything in the NFL, like anything in fantasy football, nothing is the end all be all. Nothing is the one thing you need to look at. We're just looking for a conglomeration of information, and then we try to exploit that as best as we can. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is this. We talk about the finishes of the season because that's when the money's paid out in the FFPC, the main event, Fantasy Pros Championship, best ball tournament, what have you. But, on the flip side, especially in managed leagues, maybe not so much with best ball, but especially in managed leagues, it's always important to get off to a fast start. How important is that, Ryan? Like, is that something that we should be looking at with the NFL schedule? Like, hey, look at this team. They've got 3 really good matchups because we know the defense isn't all that great. Or maybe a team has 3 really bad matchups, and we know that by and large, teams are much healthier weeks 1, 2, and 3 than they are weeks 15, 16, and 17. Can you talk about the importance or lack thereof of getting off to a fast or slow start in fantasy football?
I think the edge depends on your format. If you're in a home league with your buddies and you start off 4-0, you can do 2 things. 1, you have more breathing room, and 2, you can trade those guys because they're probably not looking at schedule edges. If, say, like again, the Jets, for instance, Garrett Wilson goes absolutely bananas in the first 4 weeks. You can maybe try to trade him, sell high in that situation if they have a tough run coming up. In a tournament, I have a much different mindset. Like, obviously, I don't want to start 1-3, but I'm not targeting early season teams. I will target more volatile offenses that have easy runs early because they have a better path to sustaining it than if, your coach is going to get fired, like the Saints, for instance. I could see that being a runaway train this year. Right. So I'm only going to be buying them at a discount in most cases. But yeah, in a tournament, you're going against so many teams. You have to be unique and you have to hit when it matters. So that's where I'm focusing in those situations.
When you talk about a team that you're kind of fading as far as how good they're going to be this year, how do you handle like players on that team that could be exploited for fantasy purposes if the team is bad? Specifically, I'll give you an example. New Orleans, Chris Olave. If the team is bad and if they're losing, you'd like to think that Olave is catching a lot of passes or should be catching a lot of passes from Derek Carr because they're trying to catch up. Is that just an oversimplification, or is there something to be said for something like that?
No, I think that can factor in. And for the Saints, Olave is probably the one guy on the offense that I'm going to just take a cost to a degree at least. But, like we talked about the running back situation. If they're 1-9, why are they going to run Alvin Kamara into the ground?
Yes.
Well, they're going to see what they have with other guys. I think, if they're bad, Rashid Shaheed probably gets hurt. Juwan Johnson probably gets hurt. And I don't mean injured. I mean, like, they probably ticks their value. So, it can be like, I'll give you this example. Arizona starts with a very hard schedule, so I'm going to handle this from 2 perspectives. In the offensive rookie of the year market, I'm going to wait on Marvin Harrison until week 10, hoping that he's built a decent foundation, but his odds slide. And then after their bye, their schedule eases up, and if he's in striking distance and I can get him at the right odds, I'm going to place a bet on him at that point. And I'm going to do the same thing with trades. If he underwhelms early on while he gets acclimated to the offense, while he plays, Sauce Gardner and the Bears and all sorts of tough teams.
This is why the FFPC players love this show, because our guest co-hosts are playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. And that is a perfect example of how to play chess with Marvin Harrison as far as his NFL Rookie of the Year odds go. Let's get into weeks 15, 16, 17. The sprint in the FFPC main event, the Fantasy Pros Championship as well. We'll start it off on the positive side. Who are some of the teams, after you saw the schedule release, Ryan, who are some of the teams that you want to be in business with for those final 3 weeks of the year?
Love the phrasing, Eric. The 49ers are the big one. They're the obvious one. You're taking them anyway. But, Rams on Thursday night at Dolphins versus the Lions on Monday night. That's a wonderful stretch, shootout potential in all those contests. I guess we can't call the Packers an under the radar team at this point. That's not reality. But at Seattle versus New Orleans, who may be dead, and at Minnesota is a very good stretch run down in the end, especially since they only play 1 game in New Orleans. In Green Bay in December is a positive for them. That might be Josh Jacobs week, Eric, or maybe it'll be Marshawn Lloyd week. We'll see what happens.
Or AJ Dillon week.
Man. What he did last year, I don't know if AJ Dillon week's on the table anymore.
You know what's so funny about that is like when he was drafted in the 2nd round, immediately I'm like this is a horrible pick. This is an overdraft. But I'm like, we'll give Brian Gutekunst the benefit of the doubt. And then he had a game against Tennessee his rookie year where he had like 130, 140 rushing yards in the snow. Like, it was a cold. I'm like, okay, this is why they got him. Never come close to that since then. and it sucks because he is such a good guy, and he's such a good, he for Northeast Wisconsin, everybody loves him here. He frequents a lot of the local establishments and restaurants, and everybody loves him. But at the same time, my God, my man, you got to do something more, and he hasn't at this point. And I really think that you're right. It's Jacobs and Lloyd down the stretch, if anybody.
I got one more for you too.
Go ahead.
I really like the Colts down the stretch. At Denver versus Tennessee, at the Giants. They could conceivably win each of those games with some distance. It's one of the reasons why I'm probably a little above Jonathan Taylor, a little bit above consensus on Jonathan Taylor, because I could see him steamrolling all three of those teams.
Kev Wheeler, if Dylan is the guy you need, I'm going broke. All right, last AJ Dillon joke. I don't want to rip on him too much, but I do. And Mile High Luke, the botanical extricator. His name always gets cut off. Thoughts on Josh Downs, real quick. We kind of touched on this a little bit in the first hour, but as long as we're talking about Indianapolis, you like Downs better than AD Mitchell. What about Josh Downs versus Michael Pittman when you consider the ADP on these guys, Josh? Because Pittman's obviously going a lot higher. Pittman is going as wide receiver. I just had it up. Wide receiver 17. Josh Downs, wide receiver 62. Downs, is he a better pick in the 14th round than Pittman would be in the 3rd?
I'm not sure I say I would use the word better. I'm going to probably at least be even on Pittman. I think where he's going is fine. But yeah, I think Josh Downs probably has a clearer path to exceeding expectations. But Pittman's, I think Pittman's a real player at this point.
Mile High Luke, botanical extraction. I got to get my weed lingo up because that's where I missed on that. Okay, those were the teams to target in weeks 15 through 17. What about some teams that you're? I don't want fade's a strong word, but teams that you're not necessarily targeting because you don't like their week 15 to 17 schedule.
There's one that I really don't like, even though it looks like it's good, and that's the Browns versus Kansas City in week 15, at the Bengals week 16, versus the Dolphins in week 17. Those are all offenses that could potentially push them. But all of those games, there's 3 cities that concern me for weather: Buffalo, Chicago, and Cleveland. They're all on Great Lakes. Just about every year, they all get a game where they get like 40-mile-an-hour wind where no one can even – you got to run the ball 40 times. All 3 of those games are played in Ohio, including the Bengals game. I could see one of them being basically dead for at least one of those weeks, unless you take a running back. But, with the Nick Chubb situation, I'm not sure I really want to over dabble there.
The Chubb situation, I mean, like, is he off your board at this point? I always hesitate to use that phrase, oh, he's off my board, because everybody has their price. But we just saw the report today, Nick Chubb without a timetable to return. I mean,
yeah, that's not good.
Especially when you consider that how bad the injury was last year. It's really tough for me to soak a draft pick. And by the way, for anybody who's wondering, well, Bulky, his ADP has got to be depressed. It is, but is it depressed enough? I don't know at this point. Nick Chubb right now in the FFPC best ball tournament is going as running back 36 at the 10:07. Again, still too high for me.
Yeah, it's still too high for me too. The only reason why I'm even sort of in the middle there is because the Browns have an elite offensive line. So if he does come back, he could make a difference. But yes, that sounds like a situation to avoid. I'm still out on him at that cost too.
Mile High Luke, he knows it's going to be a long road. Knee, 2 dislocations. Just wow, it was nasty when we saw that. And it's I had just traded in one of my dynasty leagues before the start of the season. I traded Rachaad White for Nick Chubb. And I totally regret that pick now. Although Rachaad White, I don't know. I'm not very bullish on him this season. We'll see what happens there. From a betting standpoint, Ryan, and I think this is crucial to get into. How did you attack some player props after the schedule was released, or maybe some team props as well? How did you exploit the NFL schedule after you saw who was playing who and when?
One team that I'm going to go with win totals here that I kept a very watchful eye on for the schedule release was the Giants. I love that everyone hates them. I thought their number was going to be low. If they had a hard early schedule, I was going to be completely out. Since it's manageable, I put a little bit on it, a little bit more bullish on them, because if they have some early success, I think it has a better chance of carrying over through the rest of the season, where, again, if they start like 1-3, that could become a bad situation very fast.
What about and I know you did a podcast. Did you do it with Evan Silva, the NFL awards podcast that I know that you center on with Establish the Run, when you talk about the betting odds for, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, everything like that? Can you tell us a little bit about the season-long award lines that you think are worth attacking from a betting perspective, given the odds?
Yeah, every year in May, I join Evan and Adam Levitan, and then in season I do a show with Adam Levitan about awards markets. And if you're a fantasy player, which if you're watching this, not only you're a fantasy player, you're a maniac like us. You're doing this all year. You love this stuff. The Offensive Player of the Year award is one that I don't really put as much research into because it was all over the road for years. Like sometimes the best quarterback wins it, sometimes the MVP double dips, sometimes the skill position player wins it. But in the last 5 years, the skill position players won it every year. So and this is the way it should be. I hope it continues. It's become essentially the best fantasy player award. So if you get someone like Jamar Chase has nice odds. If say like you like Bijan Robinson to like be the running back one, if you're going to be overweight on those guys in best ball, you're playing some high volume. Put in a little depends on odds. It always depends on odds. Putting a little sprinkle on them makes sense in that market. And similarly, if you like a mid-range long shot or better, like for instance, if you're big on Malik Neighbors, where I don't know where he's going on the FFPC right now. Is he going in the 3rd round?
In the FFPC best ball tournament right now, the latest ADP I have for Malik Neighbors is wide receiver 19 at the 401. So real fringy, the end of the 3rd, early 4th.
Yeah, I was surprised that he went that early. But if you're taking him at that spot and he's like say 14-1 in the offensive rookie of the year race, I'd consider putting a little bet on him. Same if the Panthers running back, what's his name, Brown, off the top of my head,
Jonathan
Brooks.
Yeah.
Evan liked him as a deep long shot. He's another guy. Like if you're high on him in fantasy, he's Evan nuked that market as soon as he said it, but he's worth considering, worth keeping an eye on if you like that too.
There is, let's see, what did I wanted to ask you some other stuff. Okay, here's what we should do. We got a couple of minutes left. We can go rapid fire on this or not, however we want to attack it. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, all 1st round picks right now. And I know this isn't helping a ton of people because it's like, well, who do you pick? Well, if you don't have a top 2 pick, you really don't have a shot at McCaffrey. Your thoughts on those big 3 1st round running backs in FFPC drafts this year?
I actually like all of them. I'm probably going to take them at cost regardless of where they go because, that's the cluster to me. Just like with Gibbs, I think he's priced appropriately. Like all of them, probably like them in that order too. I wouldn't surprise me if Bijan ended up on top.
And Gibbs too is the other guy. I mentioned this in one of the shows I was doing on Tuesday night. There's a non-zero chance Jahmyr Gibbs could be the number 1 overall running back this year too. I don't think this guy's going to end up as the number 1 overall running back, but NFL.com reports that Matt Eberflus says he sees DeAndre Swift as a weapon back on offense. Eberflus says Swift was somebody that they needed to, quote, operate on 3rd down and even on 1st and 2nd down to be a weapon in the deep part of the field and the short part of the field and take it the distance. To me, I read this and I'm like, God, they want to use him all over. This is like what the Lions want to do with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I know Swift probably isn't as talented as Jahmyr Gibbs, but that's okay. Because if we look at the ADP on DeAndre Swift right now, 609 running back 19. My concern, or one of my concerns, maybe my biggest concern, Caleb Williams can use his legs. And when you have a quarterback that can use their legs, that usually doesn't mean great things for a pass-catching running back. So I think that pushes him down a little bit. But given what Eberflus said about Swift, are you bumping him up a little bit? Would you rather take him higher than the 609 where he's going right now?
I think that's here. First, I agree with you entirely. I'm a little concerned with passing game volume, but them talking about using him in the deep part of the field, Caleb Williams is a wonderful play extender. There could be some interesting spike plays in that, but that's not really reliable. So I think where he's priced is fair. I'm not really going out of my way to take him earlier than where he's at.
Khalil Herbert, Mile High Luke, we'll wrap it up with this. I think Khalil Herbert takes over the rushing and goal line role. Smith seems to struggle between the tackles and the goal line, plus his health. And I think that's all things we need to take into point. The thing I would say about Herbert is he is going right now as running back 56 at the 15-12. Ryan, I've heard scuttlebutt that he may not make the team this year, and that gives me a little bit of pause. But your thoughts on Khalil Herbert in Chicago?
That surprises me a little bit, but they have Roschon Johnson. If Herbert stays, this is probably his last year in Chicago. So I think he should probably fill that role and be the secondary runner, but I'm a little concerned if they're talking about maybe he doesn't make the team at all.
I think that a guy, regardless of where your fantasy analysis proclivities lie, a guy that has to make the team each and every time is Ryan Reynolds at Ryan Reynolds NFL. A guy that you can check out on the Player Profiler family of podcasts, the Player Profiler Network, playerprofiler.com, established the run as well throughout the season, not only with that podcast that he did with Adam Levitin and Evan Silva, but the shows that you do with Adam Levitin throughout the season regarding that too. If you're a fantasy player, I know it's more of a betting angle, but this is stuff we need to know for fantasy purposes as well as dynasty purposes. Ryan Reynolds, NFL on the X, is that the best way to keep up with everything that you're doing, Ryan?
Yeah, that's where I do most of my stuff. I'm actually going to use Twitter more this year. So yeah, check me out on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it.
I love it. And we will continue to check you out there as well as Establish Run and Player Profiler. As a reminder, 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship is live, as well as the FFPC main event, a pair of $1 million grand prizes. If you want to register for that, do so by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, as well as going to myffpc.com. A $125 entry fee gets you in to the $300,000 grand prize in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament. We talked a lot about that tonight. And if you want to get in the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, a $100,000 grand prize, that's only going to cost you $35. MyFFPC.com is where to go if you want to play fantasy football every single day of the year. Empire Dynasty Leagues, Dynasty Startups, available at MyFFPC.com as well. Make sure you're checking that out. And as far as the Fantasy Pros Championship goes, where you can enter for $350 for a $1 million grand prize, if you register by June 15th and draft by June 30th, you will get a free $35 FFPC team credit into your account. We'll do that up to 3 times as well. So register now at myffpc.com. Brian, this was so much fun. Let's do this again sometime, man.
Absolutely, man. Always a pleasure to come on.
At Ryan Reynolds NFL. For Ryan Reynolds, I'm Eric Balkman. And for our producer, Matt Deutsch, join us again next week at 7 o'clock. Sports Gambling Podcast. Ryan Kramer will hop aboard with me for 2 full hours. Get into the FFPC drafts right now. I'm commissioning tonight. Would love to see you in there. Thank you so much for watching, and we will talk with you again next week.